Another story we're following this morning. New court records offer a look into a secretive extremist group that the FBI actually infiltrated after the Capitol insurrection. The group disguised itself, calling itself a Bible study group, but expressed interest in a second American Civil War, seceding from the U.S., also crucially testing homemade bombs. CNN's Whitney Wild has been following this. She joins me now from Washington. How far along was this plot, and how seriously is the FBI taking this group?
Well, according to these FBI documents, it got far enough that this man at the center of this case, Phi Duong, is accused of having a stash of weapons, and he had intended, according to the FBI, to create and then test Molotov cocktails. So as far as procuring weapons, I mean, it got pretty far. There was a discussion about surveilling the Capitol, looking for weaknesses. This is all part of this FBI case that was building against this man. Here's the breakdown of how this all happened. These are newly disclosed criminal cases against a man named Phi Duong. The FBI says that he attended what members call a, quote, Bible study meeting in Alexandria in February when members discussed, among other things, secession, weaponry, combat training. This was all uncovered, Jim, because an undercover FBI agent infiltrated this group. At one meeting, another undercover agent saw 5 boxes filled with about 50 glass bottles. An agent heard Duong and another person talking about what they could fill them with to make explosives. Duong and the undercover agent met with another undercover agent in June to discuss testing homemade bombs. The timeline here, Jim, is significant because what the FBI says is that Duong got into the Capitol on January 6th. He was disguised. He, according to the FBI, was wearing all black. He was also wearing a mask to shield his face. He had allegedly told an undercover Metropolitan Police officer that he was disguising himself as Antifa. That day is significant because he's facing charges for his role in the insurrection. But it didn't end there, Jim. This FBI investigation lasted months. Again, they were infiltrating this group in February. They were still learning more about their intentions by June. It's important to note that this man is not charged with any charges that may have originated after January 6th. He's only charged in the insurrection case. He has not been formally indicted. He's not entered a guilty plea. His attorney would not respond to a request from CNN. But what it shows, Jim, is that there is this lingering inclination to, I guess, leave the United States, overthrow the government. I mean, these conspiracy theory-driven ideas, these extremist ideas are still present. This is the very thing U.S. Capitol Police are worried about.
No question. Anti-government, and many of them very heavily armed, these groups. Whitney Wild, thanks very much. Joining me now to discuss, Julia Kimes. She's a CNN national security analyst, also former Assistant Secretary of Homeland Security during the Obama administration. Julia, great to have you on to talk about this. I mean, this was one of the concerns of many about January 6th was that it gave us a vision into groups like this, extremist groups in this country that have this anti-government, conspiracy-driven kind of mentality. Tell us how serious you think this particular plot is.
Well, this particular plot looks like it was more than a bunch of guys just, talking around a table with beers. That they've been purchasing and planning under the guise of a Bible study group. And I think it just does show that many of the terrorists and insurrectionists of January 6th left January 6th believing that it was a victory. In other words, even though they did not kill Nancy Pelosi as they might have intended, they lived another day. And that's sort of the benefit and the importance of these prosecutions, because even though they didn't happen on January 6th, over 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, keep them scared, keep them wondering, because a terror group that is concerned about its own survival is unable to recruit, to get money, to organize. And that's exactly what you're seeing. But no one should believe that these people sort of, ended their ideas or Trump tells them, and the GOP supports it, the violence that is part of the big lie. In other words, Donald Trump was denied a second term, and they believe it and they're going to fight for it. So these prosecutions are such a key part of our counterterrorism effort right now.
No question. And it's notable, right, that they still view it as a victory. I mean, it's the way terrorists think, right? The fear is the objective. I wonder, you have more than 500 charges now issued to people who took part in that. You have something like this exposed after the fact. How much of a vision has it given law enforcement into these groups to allow them to assess both the scope, but also to get a handle, on some of these groups?
Yeah, so I would put the January 6th defendants into three camps that the FBI is looking at, and we're sort of at the best camp right now. The first is what I call the noisy trespassers. I'm not forgiving them. They should suffer a penalty, but these are people who sort of got swept up, had wanted to see Trump, and sort of ended up in the Capitol. The second is the violent trespassers, those who are breaking down doors, harming police officers. Those people should face and are facing real jail time. They harmed people and property. The third is the organizers. That's where we are now, and that's why it seems like there's a lot more activity. Those are people who organized it, may have had communications with people in the White House, may have had communications with people on the Hill. They were planning, and call it what you will, but an insurrection, essentially. That's where we are right now, and so that's why you're seeing a lot of these plea deals out of some of these terror organizations. These guys are facing real time, and they are now turning on each other. And I always smile whenever I say that because they are now paranoid. They don't know who's telling what. So that will lead others to come forward and say, look, I had a phone call with this congresswoman, or I was in touch with the White House or with Roger Stone, or whatever the case may be.
Prisoner's dilemma, right? We know the FBI considers these domestic terror groups the biggest current terror threat to the U.S. over international terrorism. Just describe briefly the level of concern among law enforcement.
So I talked to a lot of these folks. I am still involved with them, and so I would put it sort of 80-20 at this. Said 80% of the focus is on white supremacy and insurrection terrorism, and the reason why is, of course, because it's not just in D.C. 50 states, 50 governors, mayors, all election. These secretaries of state are facing threats. All of these folks are sort of a target of this white supremacy group, and that's the basis of our democracy. So it's sort of a fight for our survival. I don't mean to minimize the foreign terror threat. It's still there, although we do fight it abroad. But nonetheless, even the foreign terror threat doesn't seem existential as the way that this domestic terror threat supported by the GOP and their talking points is.
It's an alarming assessment. Juliette Keim, thanks very much.